It is with great pleasure and great excitement that I welcome you to our online meeting. Let me also share with you my pleasure that we have received more than 180 registrations for our event, which means that today we will have a fantastic company. I promise to introduce myself in a few moments. Today is Schizophrenia Awareness Day, which helps us to remember that there are so many people in our society who lives with this little understood and much studied condition. There are many people who want to do something to make life better for these people. There are many people who are companions and loved ones of these special people. But there are really many people who misunderstand, who will not understand, who discriminate them, who discriminate these brilliant human beings. And perhaps, and it is really important, or even today was made possible by people living with schizophrenia, working with us, making their voices heard, working to make their own lives better. And that's a wonderful thing. But I think for a moment, we should think about the many people with schizophrenia around the world who don't talk about their condition, who live in fear, who are rarely asked about their opinions or about their own lives. The person who opens in perhaps in the most difficult position today at this time, because I have to present myself, and I hope I can do it in an easy way. I'm Peter Kéri, a man for whom this day means a lot in so many ways. I'm a person who was taken, let's say, by schizophrenia at the age of 43, someone who meets and works with really many people with schizophrenia every day, and I try to hear their voices every day. A few months ago, I was elected president of GAMIAN-Europe. I truly believe our brilliant pan-European organization representing the interest of people with mental illness for more than 2 decades. After a few years of working together with GAMIAN in several projects, not only in my home country of Hungary, but together with my organization, I can do something to make the voice of people with mental illness heard by everyone who is interested in this issue. And in this topic, I truly believe everyone is involved. That's why I'm so happy about today's event, which is really good example of what it's like when respected high-level organizations, decision makers, work with the people affected in the most natural way to make their future better, because of the future of all is shared, and we can shape it only together in good cooperation. And cooperating well is, I tell you, easy. The people who are going to speak are already working to make sure that anyone living with a diagnosis, this diagnosis, very severe mental illness, who is lonely or used not to talking about their condition, who is never asked what it's like to be schizophrenic, can have their voice heard in the future. I'm very glad you are here, and please continue to support GAMIAN-Europe. Help us to make the voices of people with mental health problems heard. Thank you. And I hand the floor over to our event moderator, Muijen.
Thank you very much, Peter, for this perfect introduction on Schizophrenia Awareness Day, on this seminar organized by GAMIAN. We have so many of you here. I wish I could see you live, but this is always the limitation of virtual events. Important day when we will addressing some of the findings, the conclusions of a project GAMIAN conducted together with the European Psychiatric Association. And the project itself is actually about building trust between patient groups and professional groups. And it's great later that Professor Peter Valkai, past president, is here, but we also have speakers who are representing people living with schizophrenia, as well as the carers. It's a day about how trust can be developed between everyone involved in schizophrenia. And the person who conducted this project was Chiara Samele, who will be our first speaker presenting this project. Chiara has a long background as head of her own consulting project, and has worked on projects with key organizations such as the European Commission, the World Health Organization, and other international institutions. So Chiara, over to you presenting the project.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Matt, for your words and the introductions. So first slide, please. So what I'd like to do now is to quickly take you through the project that we did around developing trust and effective care for people with schizophrenia. And this, as Matt and said, it was working in partnership with the European Psychiatric Association. Second slide, please. So I just wanted to do a very quick warm thank you to everyone who was involved in making the project happen. You'll be glad to know I won't read out everybody's names, but just to really give you an overview of everyone who was involved and all the different organisations, including the European Psychiatric Association, but also EUFAMI, who are the Informal Carer Association as well. Next slide, please. So what I'd like to do is just give you a quick overview of the project aims. And really this was to look at the positive and negative experiences of therapeutic relationships between people with schizophrenia and their psychiatrists. And we really wanted to kind of untangle some of the things that facilitates a good therapeutic relationship and how this can actually be achieved and built, and what the benefits ultimately are of doing this. The methods we used were fairly straightforward. It was a qualitative study, which was really to kind of listen to people's stories and really understand their perspectives. What we did at stage one, we had 2 stages. And the first stage was to speak to patients with schizophrenia and psychiatrists from 4 different European countries. And these were in Germany, Hungary, Poland, and Italy. And we asked each country to select 2 different treatment centres, outpatient centres, from where we could identify people with schizophrenia and psychiatrists. And we wanted to kind of get a bit of a representation across urban and rural areas as well. We developed semi-structured interviews, which means that we had very open-ended questions in which people could talk about their perspectives and their experiences. In the second stage, we wanted to really consolidate all of what we found in our first stage and the responses that we got to really speak to 2 members of 2 focus groups that we convened, GAMIAN-Europe convened, and these were with people with schizophrenia and psychiatrists who care and treat for people diagnosed with schizophrenia, and informal carers as well. Next slide, please. So just to give you a very quick overview, all of this is very quick. We recruited 28 people with schizophrenia and 28 psychiatrists, and these are their profiles. So for the patient profiles, we had 64% were male, mostly aged between 41 and 50 years, so a slightly older aged group, many of whom had, just under half, had sort of 16 years in terms of their length of illness, and had seen more than one psychiatrist. In fact, many had seen quite a few, which was quite interesting, and I'll pick up on this a bit later. We also had people who had only just started their journey, if you like, with mental health services. In terms of psychiatrists, we had mostly female, above the age of 41, and so typically these psychiatrists involved in the project had an average of 15 patients that they saw a day. I mean, they had many more, but these on average were what they saw. Many were very experienced practitioners or clinicians. And then in our focus group, we had, again, more patients, informal carers, and psychiatrists to feed back to. Next slide, please. So what about the patient perspectives and what they thought a good therapeutic relationship included? So in their minds, and things like acceptance, qualities like acceptance, being listened to without judgment, humour, very important, empathy, patience, warmth, calmness. All these are, probably things that you may have heard before, but it's always worth reiterating the importance of these qualities. And there are many more, of course, as well, that make a sort of trusting relationship. Trust in people with schizophrenia's mind was absolutely key, and that absolutely underpinned, the entire therapeutic relationship. Things that actually could compromise that relationship were things like, you know, very few and far between meetings, so the patient not seeing their psychiatrist very often, and also if the patient wasn't feeling too good or their symptoms were a bit more troubling than normal, this could sometimes interfere with the therapeutic process. And actually, this was where the psychiatrists agree as well. Next slide, please. So again, with the patient's perspective, there was quite a few, as I mentioned earlier, patients who had changed their psychiatrists on more than one occasion. In fact, the highest count was about 5 or more psychiatrists. And the reasons for this, the main reasons, included actually patients were saying that actually it was quite difficult to connect to the first or second psychiatrist that they'd come across or that they were seeing. Often there are service issues around changing psychiatrists as well, you know, if a psychiatrist changed jobs or they go on rotation. But essentially for patients, it was really about finding a psychiatrist that they could connect to, someone. And if you couldn't connect with someone, it was time to change in their mind. Not everybody gets this opportunity, unfortunately, but that was something that could be considered if necessary. Next slide, please. So in terms of treatment decisions, things like shared decision-making, which is a thing that is happening quite a lot now, or at least is being debated and talked about, is starting to happen. And certainly from the patients and psychiatrists we spoke to, half said that they had their say when it came to their treatment and what medication they were prepared to take. Very few patients actually receive psychotherapy, and this is an area that certainly needs to be improved upon. But the usual scenario with treatment was that the psychiatrist would propose a treatment and say, look, you know, there are these treatments, what do you think? And then they each had a chance to kind of express their views about it, whether, you know, and talk about side effects as well, answer any questions the patients had. And from there, they could work out a plan in terms of treatment and care. Next slide, please. What about the perspectives of informal carers? Well, actually, many carers had spent a long time involved in the care of their relative, but also in touch with psychiatric services as well. And some had actually mentioned how this relationship over time, in terms of their relationship with psychiatrists, were actually quite positive and had changed for the better. And psychiatrists have really also noted from the ones we spoke to, how important it was to include families and carer in the treatment and care process. They felt that this was so important and is now doing this a lot more regularly than they did, 2, 10 or 20 years ago. Next slide, please. So from the psychiatrist perspective, what was it that, what sorts of factors were needed to build a therapeutic relationship? Well, actually, psychiatrists were very aware that this can be quite a difficult and drawn out process. It's not something that happens very easily. It's something that has to be worked on. And in their minds, it was important to be able to pay attention to what the patient tells them, to have patience and a willingness to compromise. So to have flexibility in that therapeutic relationship, that was really important. And to perceive the patient as valuable and take them very seriously, especially what they say. They also felt it was quite important to establish boundaries, for example, not, out of hours chats or discussions, and that it was really important to discuss, perhaps potentially difficult or challenging issues. Next slide, please. So what about meetings? So from the psychiatrist perspective, again, this could be compromised when patients' symptoms were not so great. It was quite hard in a way for many to then reflect or understand any difficulties that needed to be addressed or resolved. Again, the psychiatrists also talked about some of the difficulties they experienced, and sometimes they weren't always, they didn't always have the luxury of time to listen as long as they would have liked to have listened to people. And also, if they didn't listen or they were feeling stressed, they knew that this would compromise that relationship and undermine the trust that would have been built. Sometimes disagreements do arise, tensions do arise, especially around medication. They were aware of that, but actually they knew that maintaining a good relationship had to be done. It was never taken for granted. Next slide, please. So treatment decisions, as I mentioned, from the psychiatrist perspective, they are certainly a lot more open to having a kind of more shared decision situation, if you like, and discuss with the patient, you know, what sorts of decisions and how they would like to proceed. Next slide, please. And meetings with informal carers. Again, psychiatrists really valued this. It was never, ever without the patient's permission, though, first of all. That was always an absolute obligatory, if you like. So, you know, any discussions with the carers and families, psychiatrists were very reluctant to do if the patient had not consented to that. And the work with families included from psychiatrists we spoke to said it was around improving the family's awareness of the patient's condition and also about giving them advice and support. Next slide, please. And just quickly to wrap up. So in our study, in our project, the therapeutic relationships were described as generally very positive. But these were achieved when there was quite a good connection between the patient and their psychiatrist. And practices, you know, thankfully are getting a bit better when it comes to involving patients and families in discussions about treatment and care. But I think there still is that need to make sure that patients are offered psychotherapy and recovery-oriented approaches. And that's definitely something that needs to be made the norm, if you like, particularly for people diagnosed with schizophrenia. Next slide, please. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Chiara. Thank you very much for a great summary of a complex project in 11 minutes. It's amazing.
I'm sorry, yes.
No, that's perfect. Can I just say to the audience that already some of you have asked questions via Q&A, and Chiara will answer some of them directly, others possibly at a later stage. And if you have time at the end, we might raise some of these questions in the plenary, but use the Q&A to ask questions. Now, this was very much the overview of the research that we'll now move into, is what you could argue the second stage of the seminar. Let's actually hear from patients and service users, from family members and from psychiatrists, what their perspectives are. And first, to give the patient perspective is Päivi Rissanen, who works as a specialist expert for the Finnish Central Association for Mental Health, and also has done a PhD on her personal patient experience. So no one better, Päivi, than you to tell us how all this fits together from a user perspective.
Yeah, thank you. And no, this is not working now. Okay. So sometimes living with severe mental disorder means that your life is full of psychiatric wards and symptoms, but there were also good moments on those days. For instance, friends visiting at hospital, walking in the hospital park, swimming in a river near hospital, and talking with other patients. One of my biggest problems was a self-stigma, low self-esteem, and I also associated myself as a patient. And after years, I was referred to a chronic ward as a hopeless and difficult case. This diagram is from my dissertation, and it illustrates a reality where people with mental disorders may live in Finland. This can be called as a safety net. It's a diagram of the services that I have used during my career as a patient in mental hospitals, outpatient clinics, and primary healthcare centers. For instance, I calculated that I have met over 300 different nurses plus doctors over 40. So it's obvious that this is not easy to handle. and it's not easy to find a place where to get help when you need it. Sometimes difficulties with service system may affect the relationship with mental health professionals. I wrote my diary, what all that and hopelessness meant to me. I'm just walking and walking back and forth along corridors of wards of mental hospitals, and nobody and nothing can stop me. But luckily, I was wrong. The question of my new primary nurse got my endless walking to an end. The question, Päivi, do you want to live the rest of your life at hospital? Gave me a hope and future. And my answer was the first step towards today. Little by little, I found out my way to recovery and how to live with my mental disorder. And I was encouraged to find and utilize my strengths and abilities. And related to strengths and abilities, I'd like to discuss something about meaning of studying and working. Beginning of 21st century, when I was still as a long-term patient in the mental hospital, I decided to continue my studies at university, but it was not so easy to do. I was said at hospital, that's fine, but it would be better for you to back hair rollers in the working unit. And at the university, the professor told me to write a diary and poems instead of something scientific. But in spite of all, I graduated as a licentiate of political science in December 2005, and 10 years later, I finished my PhD. And by telling my story as an expert by experience and analyzing my experiences as a patient and my recovery process, have given meaning for previous difficult times, and they have raised my self-esteem. And I couldn't have done all that without help from mental health professionals. First, I found same issues important as in Chiara's presentation. And to me, these service user worker relationships meant discussions and meetings between two individuals. It's important that an interaction is mutual, honest, and real. And recovery has meant that both me and the worker should have had courage to feel our way in the dark. Granted, the terrain walked on may reveal itself over time, and that's why recovery requires coping with uncertainty and unknown. But at the same time, I found something very familiar, myself. And it was important that workers have listened to me and seen me as myself, just the way I was and I am. They have been mirrors in which I have seen myself. Then the recovery was a demanding task because my life has changed during the process. For instance, returning to work after disability pension has not been easy. Also, it has been a positive change. During the recovery, I've encountered my past, my feelings, my life, and myself as they really are. That's soothing in the end, but it is, and it has not been easy. In addition, the recovery process has been passing in the dark, and it has been at the same time ability and possibility to see the light and the future. And finally, your dreams can come true even if you live with severe mental disorder. And before I finish, I want to share with you a personal memory with hope and future from an hospital yard a long time ago. I'm walking in the hospital park. A small bird sits on a bench. We look at each other for a while. The bird is flying away. Now I know we both fly away because I can fly too. Thank you.
Thank you, Päivi. I'm very reluctant to even start talking because I'm so moved by your presentation. It was a wonderful presentation, and reluctantly, two messages I actually get from it. And let me tell you, first of all, that the surface picture, which was this devastating, and it actually shows to me, I never really realized it to that extent, that surfaces can become so good that it actually become bad again. It's just too complex. It's impenetrable. And I never quite thought about that all these different surface components, elements, psychiatrists, psychologists, etc., etc. Where's the user in all that? And that's a really amazing insight, actually. The other one is what I like so much about presentation is actually you took responsibility. It actually shows in the end, it's the person who has to make the world real. And what you said in the end about flying, I thought it was wonderful, and I'm reluctant to say anything more because it was very much your presentation. Who am I to comment on it? Thank you very much. It was genuinely great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And if any people again want to make comments or ask questions, put in Q&A. Päivi will respond to directly, and I hope we have time at the end to come back to you, Päivi. But we have lots of speakers, but I hope we have some time. Thank you again. So the other, of course, we really in this seminar are dealing with triangle, isn't it, between patient and users in one corner, carers in the second, and psychiatrists in the third. And psychiatrists, I mean all professional staff. And André Decraene, our next speaker, represents the care's perspective, EUFAMI. He's vice president of EUFAMI. But probably even more importantly, you've also been a carer yourself for a son who suffered from mental health problems for 15 years. So again, you can talk both representing EUFAMI, who is an important party to GAMIAN, we're often facing the same challenges. You can also talk very much about what you know about this personally. Over to you, André.
Thank you, Mats. EUFAMI is grateful to EPA and GAMIAN for organizing this webinar and giving us the opportunity to share with you the perspective for family carers living with someone with schizophrenia. Could you go to slide 3, please? Slide 3. Yes, thank you. Let me say from the beginning that EUFAMI is convinced that it is possible for all persons with schizophrenia to achieve control of their lives, to recover their self-esteem, and move towards life where they experience a sense of belonging and participation. It is the main concern of family carers to organize things towards that unique and ultimate goal. Crucial to this goal is a therapeutic alliance between patient, family care, and psychiatrist and other professional carers. Please consider my intervention as a message of hope. Mental health care has undergone a great transformation since the introduction of community mental health care. But we are not there yet. It is recognized that a lot about schizophrenia is not fully understood, and the high quality care and support needed by people living with this condition is often unavailable. But it is certainly so that community mental health care has shifted a lot of burden on family carers who often become frontline carers. In this context, I want to highlight the main concerns of the family carers by this testimonial as a father of a now 44-year-old son who was highly gifted and still is. It is a story of a personal experience, but the concrete details are so typical and so recognizable by any other family care. The different items of this testimonial are classified in a chronological order of occurrence and show an increasing intensity of burden. Thank you very much for slide 4. Before my wife and I concluded that it was a mental health problem, we had many questions. What is happening? Is it protracted adolescence? Periods of distress followed periods of self-overestimation. Unexplained absence from school, home and friends, unpredictable behavior, difficulty to hold to agreements. The questions turned around the limits of tolerance. When does strange behavior become really worrying? Periods of strange behavior were followed by periods of recovery of normality. Unpredictable behavior showed absence of usual logic. There was always something wrong, in variable degrees, followed by periods of normal behavior until the day that behavior becomes very erratic and completely out of usual logic. For instance, making little or no difference between day and night, starting to talk loudly or not at all, making train journeys without paying the fare, getting caught, and accumulate fines. Then it becomes clear it is of a psychiatric nature. Strange stories were confirmed by teachers. Then starts a period of long and an unpredictable collection of visits to a recommended psychiatrist who wants to understand first, not to condemn someone, as they rightfully say, taking months before therapy is started. In the meantime, family carers are confronted with further uncertainty, no diagnosis, no indication of what can be expected, except that it will be difficult, staying with the illusion of a shorter than lifetime experience. This confrontation with reality is so remote from expectations, such as studying, looking for and finding work and financial income, and becoming financially independent. Slide 5, please. Very confrontational is self-stigma, struggling with the belief that the illness was provoked by wrong education or by sometimes distorted relationships between parents, which in itself can be entirely or partly provoked by the stressful situation and the inability to assess it. Reinforced by gossip from reproaches by family members, uncles, aunts, grandparents, friends, etc. There is often familial stigma that illness is running somewhere in the family, which leads to unconfirmed suppositions, links, and suspicion that something has been hidden. It is a very confronting experience that your child is conscious that something strange is happening to himself, without being able to express it, as he finds no words to describe it in normal words and help his parents to provide relief, adding another cause for strange, sometimes violent behavior. Then comes the feeling that there will be no end to this continuous descent to hell, day and night, all the days of the year until you die. No respite, never. What after we die? Will his sister be able to cope with the situation? She has experienced multiple broken relationships because of this burden. It kept us busy for years. Adding to the familial stigma is the real question about intergenerational transmission of mental illness. What about our other child? What is the risk of transmitting schizophrenia, in spite of the fact that she is mentally fit? How did she cope with that question? We learned years after it was confirmed that our son was mentally ill, that she thoroughly investigated the question in silence, without bothering us, because she thought unnecessarily that we had to be spared. If you consult specialist genetics or specialists in genetics, they provide you with statistical explanations and very general information on how to deal with. Of course, the decision how one will deal with it is an individual decision. But what a decision. Our daughter decided she would have no children. This is how my wife and I are deprived of the pleasure of having grandchildren. Slide 7, please. I want to conclude this intervention with the thought that all of the above is worthwhile, in spite of all the anxieties it has generated. I strongly believe it has made a better person out of me, more inclusive, more patient, more understanding, more indulgent, more solution-oriented, more positive, looking to bring positivism in all situations. From the more positive experience, I would like to mention the conviction that applying and deepening the tripartite therapeutic alliance is the way forward, things being what they are. All of the above is in conformity with human rights-based approach of empowerment, equality, non-discrimination, participation, self-determination, and inclusion. These principles are enshrined in the Conventions on Human Rights at United Nations, European Union, and national levels. Thank you for listening. I will be available for answering any question you may have at the end of this webinar.
Thank you, André. Presentation again deserving a bit of silence because it's so self-containing and it's I think again we so often underestimate the burden on carers and what you were mentioning earlier about the tripartite working together. That actually stood at the heart of this project, which was initiated between GAMIAN and the EPA with support from EUFAMI, because it was the awareness that we all try the same, whether you're a patient, you're a psychiatrist, a family member, we all want people with mental health problems to live a full life. And the establishment of this project between GAMIAN and EPA was a very important step forward to create trust between these diverse organizations. I have to say that EPA was totally supportive of it from the very beginning and actually offered even GAMIAN a seat on the board of EPA as a strong sign of the importance of this partnership. Professor Peter Valkijn, who is the past president of EPA, was very much part of this support and throughout has been very much keen to present the findings of this project. Professor Valkijn is one of the very eminent psychiatrists in Europe. As I said, past president of the EPA. It's also a professor and chairman of University Hospital in Munich, one of the leading psychiatric research centers in Europe. So Peter, I should say, shouldn't I, in German? Over to you, and very interested to hear your perspective.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much, Matt, and your team for actually initiating this, because I think within my 2 years of presidency, it was one of the most important projects. I learned a lot, and I think we all gained a lot. So I will open up my presentation. Here we are. So hope you can see it well. And is it seeable, Matt?
Can you put it on full screen? We can see it.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, perfect.
So I will speak about the relationship between patients, carers, and our profession. And so first of all, I'd like to speak about the foundation of relationships. So if you think of a meta level, so what are goals when I have a relationship? Well, relationship between a patient or sort of a consumer, as we would say, and a psychiatrist is on one hand to seek advice for diagnosis and treatment for a given condition we call disease. And looking at the patient's perspective, convince myself, so the patient themselves and my carer, the diagnostic steps and the specific therapy are needed. So I think basically these are the goals, but the basis of that is actually trust. So actually, I think, and that is what current studies show, and all the studies have already shown, that if I can trust to receive the best possible evidence-based advice, information on diagnosis and treatment of my condition, that is the best foundation for relationship, which actually starts with seeking advice on convincing myself and the surrounding. But there are problems, and I think that's why actually looking for this kind of action, it's very important to take in mind that within medicine, psychiatry has a special position because of stigma. So, and there are some things I'd like to bring up, which are, you know, with more than 30 years in clinical psychiatry, was openly brought to me. So, are you the second best physician? So how good is the diagnosis you are putting up? Is it just an estimate, or, you know, what it is based on? Is it reliable? And what about the treatment of mental disorders? You know, I'm not sure whether they are as effective than in somatic disorders. And, you know, if that is clarified, so, you know, a psychiatrist is not the second best physician, diagnosis is reliable, and treatment seems to be at the same level as somatic disorders, how quickly can I get an appointment at a psychiatrist? Well, just one little picture. I found it quite interesting that if you actually look at HIV, people say it's not the illness, but it's actually the stigma which really kills the people. So I think we need to openly address that in our way of communicating. But if we come back about those things, we think about psychiatry and psychiatrists, what are the facts about psychiatry and psychiatrists? Well, 1 out of 10 persons worldwide have a mental illness and or mental disorder and seek treatment, when 1 out of 4 have actually diagnosis of a mental illness, but 1 out of 10. And if you can think, for instance, in Germany, we have 80 million people, so it's 8 million people who actually have mental illness and seek treatment. The reliability of the clinical diagnosis, so the clinical of mental disorders, ranges between 0.3 and 0.8, which is comparable and sometimes even better than in somatic disorders. But what we lack, and that is often what people think they should be, you know, improvement in reliability, are markers. So just think about the heart attack. You might have a pain in your chest, but then you actually do an ECG and you take bloods, and those ECG and bloods actually is something we can't do in mental disorders. But overall, what we can do is do a proper clinical diagnosis, and this is as good as any clinical diagnosis in medicine. And finally, the efficacy of psychopharmacological and psychotherapeutic treatments is comparable to somatic disorders. That is well published. So as a matter of fact, I think we are well set in actually to help people with mental illness. Well, and the question is, you know, how easy are psychiatrists to be approached? Well, there are data on that, and they are as badly approachable as any specialists of other disciplines, but I think we need to work on that. So, and this is my summary slide of what I said and what the literature shows. So what are the ingredients for a good relationship between a patient, a carer, and a psychiatrist or other specialist? Well, trust, to receive the best possible diagnosis and treatment, enough time. I think this is important, especially in psychiatry. You need time to build up this trustful relationship and actually have time and spend time with the patient. Clear and timely communication to receive a discharge letter or at discharge, and easily approachable email, WhatsApp, and so forth. So we need to be modern there. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your for listening, and I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. That was a rather excellent summary of psychiatry in 5 minutes. It's raising many of the key issues, and I thought actually very informative. It was actually, I never quite thought about it that way, about particularly the diagnostic reliability, as well as effective treatment. You're quite right. If you compare it to a heart infarct, we never do that. We always isolate. There's a degree of self-stigmatization in psychiatry, that we actually blame ourselves for not being very good at it. And if you compare to other disciplines, and also I thought the comparison of poor access, I think is also very fair. I hope you will stay for question answer at the end, because no doubt some of it will go in your direction. Now, I'm delighted to introduce Mr. Tomasz Cierkowski, apologies for pronunciation, who is a member of European Parliament from the Czech Republic, and always has been a very strong advocate for mental health in the European Parliament. He's also co-chair of the MEP Alliance for Mental Health. Delighted to have you here, Thomas, and please tell us about some of the political challenges.
Yes, it's every time my pleasure to be there, and I'm very happy that I can discuss with you this very important topic, and it's my great honor to be with you in this very important day and discuss the different perspective of living with schizophrenia. And I am confident that this debate will have its concrete results. You know very well that, and you mentioned that I'm co-chair the MEP Alliance for Mental Health and member of European Parliament. And I want reassure more than 75,000 people that have schizophrenia in the EU who are many times forgotten and overlooked. And I want to tell all of them that their families and cares, and that we in the European Union care and want to help. You know that, and some of you know that I have the personal experience in my family. My brother has schizophrenia. Also, we are living as a family with his diseases, but I feel that there is a lot of progress, especially new medications show us the new goals. And from my perspective, it's very important that we will much more talk about our personal experience as a member of European Parliament, because we can really reopen these topics between the people. In this moment, many people have fear from schizophrenia, but I think that that is the time to change it and shows that they are normal people. They can live with us and they can normally work and have it normally job as you and me. And from my perspective, I would say that I want also to take a moment to compliment the effort that went into creating the report, which has been introduced today. This is the important document, give us the hope, and I call for better cooperation and understanding between the patient and the healthcare professionals. But let's be honest, we can't just stop reading this report. We need policy reform at the member states and EU level, and we need much more vision for the future. There is very important have it strong cooperation between patient and psychiatrists and foster a therapeutic relation that is truly effective. And as a policymakers, we must ensure that mental health services are not mere word on paper, but living and breathing system that uplift help individuals. So what are the key improvements we must make? First, foremost, we need mental health professionals who are armed with the knowledge and skills to truly understand and respond to the needs of those living with schizophrenia. We providing that with training, and we give them the tools that they can use and offer compassionate care. But this is not all. We must also recognize that overlooking heroes, that careers who without question support their loved one. but allocating more resources and providing that with the assistance they need, we can ensure that careers have to strengthen to continue their vital role in the lives of this with schizophrenia. Let's also not forget that the power of innovation. We need new psychotherapy and recovery focused strategies. They can transform lives and pave the way of the especially recoveries. And there is the issue of time of the essence. What when I come to schizophrenia, we need policies that promote early prevention, continuous support, and comprehensive care. By acting swiftly, we can provide individuals with care and need when they need it most. Now, let me be clear. The report before us paint a hopeful picture, but let's not settle for good enough. We need the EU-wide mental health strategy and really dedicate funding to help patients. We need and will build on this report to introduce mindful policy changes. And to the end, we need to cooperate beyond this webinar. I ask stakeholders from the policymakers to patient, psychiatrists to care and carry to conversation forward. Tonight, together we can create an environment where individuals with schizophrenia are not overlooked. Also, this is most important goal for us. Thank you very much for your invitation, and I wish you pleasant seminar.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Thank you very much for this great summary, and also highlighting some of the key issues in mental health. And also thank you for your unstinting support to mental health, which is an area that really needs champions like you. And long may it last, and I hope you will continue to be so engaged. Thank you very much for being here.
Absolutely, you can count with me.
Thank you. And that's which now gives us a bit of an opportunity. I hope you stay with us for answers, well, questions first and then answers. And I noticed one question that is particularly relevant here from Istvan Galai. And Istvan, do you want to ask the question yourself? Can you answer the question, ask the question, or do I need to read it out? Where's Istvan? Ah, there you are, Istvan. You want to ask the question if you turn your microphone on?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you. I'm from Awakenings Foundation, Hungary, from Budapest. And my question is, first of all, I'm glad to be here in this workshop, and I think it's very important to have the effective cooperation between professionals and patients. And the questions are that I would like to know how a project like this can make a difference to care in different countries. And the second question is, and how will these results be disseminated by the GAMIAN-Europe and the European Psychiatric Association?
Thank you, so we can combine that question and say, well, how can we disseminate the results in such a way that they make an impact across Europe, isn't it? By the way, speakers, turn your camera on. That's much easier in that way to handle this. If the panel members turn the camera on, that is better. Well, why don't we ask, where's everyone? Yeah, I was actually going to ask Peter that question. So as President of Europe, president of GAMIAN-Europe, how are we going to disseminate these findings? How is it going to make an impact across Europe? And I'll ask the other Peter Falkai, the same question in a moment. Do you have Peter? Kéri, go ahead. Camera on.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you for the question, István, and it will be great to say it in Hungarian as well, Servus István, because we are from the same foundation. It is something outstanding what we have, and it is not the first time when GAMIAN-Europe with European outstanding organizations together created something for people's life, to have better life for people living with schizophrenia. At GAMIAN-Europe's house, we promise to disseminate this material via online workshops, for example, like this one, in printed materials in many places where it is possible to hand over. For example, this material was present in the last European Psychiatric Association conference in Paris, and I saw it did not last long, so we had only limited, because I think this material is very interesting. And how it can change, as GAMIAN sees it, this cooperation is something very productive, because along these ways we can see that cooperation with organizations can create really a brighter future for patients and bigger understanding in any setting. It can be a community care, it can be a clinical setting, it can be anywhere in the world. Thank you.
So now Peter, and I want to add something to this question, because you're a professor, you can handle difficult questions. Also, how do we disseminate this? How does it make a difference? Also, within the perspective of the shortage of workforce, the pressure staff are under.
Well, I think it's an important question. The question is always, how can we improve the situation? I mean, just bringing up the question is good, but not enough. But I just like to point out one thing. During my presidency, we had, let's say, telepsychiatry or telehealth as one important issue, and we just finished up a paper on that. So my way would be that the products from here, we should, possibly at the end, looking at Chiara and looking at you, Matt, make a little, 5-point plan. So what is really needed to improve that? And then, put EPA, GAMIAN, EUFAMI on board and say, okay, so